Good day! Today, I will discuss to you the meaning and relevance of history, the difference between the primary and secondary sources, as well as the difference of external and internal criticism, and their roles and contributions in the history. So what is history? History, from the Greek word historia, which means knowledge acquired through inquiry and investigation. The term history refers to accounts or inquiries of events that happened in the past. It is the discipline that studies the chronological order of events based on critical examination of source materials and usually presenting an explanation of their causes. Also, it is a field of study that traces man's development. Now, since we already knew the meaning of history, we will now proceed to answer and learn why do we need to study history.
Number 1. To learn about our past. Studying history enables us to learn about the lives of our ancestors, their struggles and achievements. Number 2. To understand the present. The traditions, system or government, cultural heritage, and many more other things are products of the past. Number 3. To appreciate our heritage in a broad perspective. Our belief system, traditions, common values, including material culture, can be understood and appreciated well if we have full understanding of our past. And number 4, to acquire a background for critical thinking. The issues, situations, and challenges that our country is presently facing can mostly be attributed in the past, for these are encountered before.
In the field of history, sources are very significant. Without it, the reconstruction of the past will be impossible. A source, by definition, is the one that provides information. In the case of history, it is divided into two, the primary and the secondary sources.
A primary source tells us about an event and is from the time of that event. Meaning, primary sources are original, factual, first-hand account, and it is made during or close to the event or period. Here are some examples of primary sources. Diaries, speeches, manuscripts, letters, autobiographies, interviews, official records, and film footage. While on the other hand, secondary sources tell us about an event but is from a time after the event. Meaning, a secondary source usually talks about the primary sources. Here are some examples of secondary sources: textbooks, magazines, encyclopedias, book reviews, commentaries, articles, and annotations. Moving on, external criticism is the practice of verifying the authenticity of evidence by examining its physical characteristics, consistency with the historical characteristic of the time when it was produced, and the materials used for evidence. While internal criticism looks at the truthfulness and factuality of the evidence by looking at the author of the source, its context, the agenda behind its creation, the knowledge which informed it, and its intended purpose.
These historical criticisms play a very significant role or contribution in history, for the goal to discover the authenticity, credibility, and truthfulness of historical context and evidences. Moreover, to establish the provenance of historical text, events, or accounts. I would strongly affirm that primary sources are superior to secondary sources because basically, primary sources are just the basis of secondary sources. And without this kind of historical source, we cannot know if the document we have is factual or correct. Moreover, it is a valuable tool to develop an understanding of Philippine history. Analyzing the content and context behind these sources can lead to a critical appraisal of certain situations or periods in the country's history. Controversies and debates continue until now about the first Mass in the Philippines. Evidences and arguments presented. Nevertheless, the conflict and the assumptions are still questionable. However, I found it more credible that the first Mass was first celebrated in Limasawa, Southern Leyte on March 31, 1521. How I said this? Because like 7 weeks ago, according to the National Historical Commission of the Philippines Chair Rene Escalante, the panel unanimously agreed that the evidence and argument presented by the pro-Butuan advocates are not sufficient and convincing enough to warrant the repeal or reversal of the ruling on the case by the NHI, or National Historical Institute. Moreover, it was evidently proven that it was first held in Limasawa, and it is definitely true, because according to Francisco Albo, one of the pilot in the Voyage of Magellan, writes on his logbook that they erected a cross on a mountain that overlooks the island. Apart from this, Jesuit priest Miguel A. Bernard, who studied Pigafetta's maps and noticed that in Pigafetta's journal, he didn't mention the crucial aspect of Butuan, the river, which makes a distinct characteristics of Butuan's geography that seemed to be much important to be missed. Therefore, the first Catholic Mass in the Philippines was held on March 31, 1521, Easter Sunday, in Limasawa, Southern Leyte. It was officiated by a priest named Father Pedro Valderrama in the shore of Mazawa in Pigafetta's journal, whom people believe is the town specifically in the shore of Limasawa in Southern Leyte. It is popularly known as the birthplace of the church in the Philippines.